Chris Betz is Federal Chief Technology Officer for Omnissa. Chris, welcome. It's great to see you. What are the big challenges that you're seeing organizations wrestling with regarding interoperability across the services? And what types of interoperability are you seeing them trying to deal with?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, by the way. I think if data is going to be at the tip of the spear, when soldiers or sailors or individuals that are downrange, when they're interpreting that data, it's got to be uniform, it's got to be consistent, and they have to all understand it in the same way. And that's very hard to do when you don't have that interoperability. And I think the other key thing when it comes to interoperability is if you've got a bunch of snowflake architectures or unique architectures that are out there that are ingesting that data differently, they're obviously going to output that data differently. So I think, consolidating platforms where there's overlap and having that unification of platform is key to our soldiers downrange interpreting the data properly.
You hit a word there that is funny to me because I've heard the word architecture here more than I probably have in the last year. And it's interesting to me that that's where so much focus of conversation is when there's a million autonomous vehicles in the room, lots of discussion about artificial intelligence and so on. What do you think is driving that kind of back to the basics movement almost?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of those things that you just mentioned rely on an architecture, and that architecture's got to be able to span across an enterprise. And, in this space, when we're talking about, when things need to communicate or operate from land to sea, sea to air, air to space, all of those things, it's very important to have a solid architecture that enables that.
We talked about that a little bit before we turned the cameras on. The fact that there is data going all over the place, all the time, in every direction. And one of the stated goals that all of the services, not just the sea services that are here, have made is to avoid having data have to come back to home base to then go out to another point somewhere on the edge.
Yeah.
What do you see as the most important factors to driving that type of data interoperability so that data can kind of move around the edge instead of that back to base?
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk about AI for a second. So obviously a lot of these systems are evolving around AI. AI, typically you've got a phone back home or consume a cloud resource somewhere to enable that capability. So I think you're going to see a lot of agentic AI that's processing that data locally in real time without having to phone back home at the edge, like you said. So I think it's important for vendors such as Omnissa that when we're accounting and, accounting for how we develop our software, that it has that on-prem SaaS capability that enables the edge.
Mm-hmm. As the desire for the department to do different things changes, what they want to accomplish as far as mission set is different now than it was a year ago, 4 years ago for sure, 5 years and so on. As that changes, what's the impact of that on the way that you and your colleagues in the defense industrial base need to build solutions for them that are flexible, that are not just scalable to get more or bigger of something, but to also maybe go in a different direction without having to start completely from scratch to accomplish the same capability?
Yeah, I think as you rationalize tool sets, right? There's some great technologies that have been around for a while and that the field uses today. Why not dive into those and expand upon those? But again, go through and rationalize the tools that you have, get rid of the overlap that exists. And where that helps us is that when we develop our software, it truly allows us to have like a unified architecture or a unified platform to enable doing exactly that.
What will you track in the next 6 months or year, especially regarding interoperability, to see this is what the department is doing, this is how we in the defense industrial base should respond?
Yeah, I think designing platforms that are agnostic to the underlying architecture, so whether it's a hyperscaler or a hypervisor or containers based or what have you, developing a piece of software that works in all of those, because obviously the Air Force is going to do something different than the Marines, likewise with the Army. But if you develop a piece of software that regardless of what that core underlying platform or architecture is, you should have software that can integrate with it and run on top of that so that it's consistent regardless of where it's running from.